My name is Barbara Reiko Mikami, and now Keimi. And I was 5 years old, 6 years old, when I went to the Merced Assembly Center. And then from there, I went to Aochi, Colorado. And then we ended up in Tule Lake.
My name is June Kyoko Aochi Berk,
Wow.
and I am 88 years old, and I was 10 years old when I went into camp. And I went to first I went to Santa Anita Assembly Center, and then from there, we went to Rower, Arkansas.
My name is Masako Iwawaki Koga-Murakami, and we did not go to Assembly Center, but we moved to, I'm from San Francisco, we moved to Fowler, and then we went to Gila Camp 1, and then when my parents wanted to go to Japan because my father was the eldest in the family, so we went to Tule Lake. They both answered no.
I don't remember packing up for camp, but then I know when we were living in Huntington Beach with my grand uncle, my mother's uncle and aunt, because my dad had been picked up by then. And so we were living in Huntington Beach with my grand aunt's house. And I know at night it was blackout, and so the curtains had all black curtains on there. And then I would try to peek out, like in the early morning, and to see, what I could see. And to me, I remember seeing soldiers standing on the roofs, because we were in like a complex with the other families living in homes. And when I looked out the window, it looked like I saw soldiers standing on the roofs. And then because my dad had been picked up and my mother was left with me and my brother, we decided, or my mom decided, to go with some friends to Yuba City.
I remember before we went to camp, we had yard sales all along the block. Everybody put their furniture up on the lawn, and it was like a yard sale. And we had to sell everything that we could. And I remember selling my dad's lawnmower for 50 cents, and I thought that was a big deal. And I was very happy. And then we heard we better pack boots to go to Manzanar or Poston because they have snakes and other things that might bite us. And then I didn't want to wear those big old ugly brown boots, so I made my mother buy me really cute white majorette boots.
I remember those.
Yeah, because during Nisei week before the war, I used to follow, I don't know what her name was, but she was a girl that led the Nisei week parade, twirling a baton. And she, I just wanted to be like her, do the baton. So I made my mother buy me majorette boots to take to camp. And then they told us to buy big goggles because there's a lot of dust storms in Manzanar and Poston. So we got ready to go to camp, and I don't remember too much. I remember we had a dog, a puppy named Tippy, and I don't know what happened to him. I think we left him with our neighbor. I'm hoping we left him with our neighbor. And I don't know how my brother and I were trying to figure out who took us to the bus station.
Sorry.
And we, from the bus station, we got on the bus, and the bus took us to Santa Anita. I remember seeing while we were on the bus, some kids that on the playground, school came running up to us, and I was waving to them, and I thought they were waving back to us. But they had somebody had a sign that said, "Good riddance, Japs." And then I sort of sat down, and I realized that they were just happy to get rid of us. So we rode on the bus, and I don't remember. I'm sure there were armed guards there at the bus station for us to get on the bus, and that scared me. Then when we got to Santa Anita, we were told to take one sack, and then we took one sack each, and then we stuffed it with straw from the straw pile, and that was our mattress to sleep on. So we took that, we dragged it to the horse stall that we were going to be placed in, and we saw the horse stall, and my father, my mother, and I slept in the back part of the horse stall, and my sister and my brother slept in the front, quote, living room of the horse stall. So I guess that's where they kept the hay or something. That's what I remember about going into camp.
We moved from San Francisco to Fowler, California, which is in Central California, near Fresno, because that was supposedly the white zone, and my father thought that we wouldn't have to go to camp if we went there. But lo and behold, there we were with all the Central California Japanese. So we went to Gila, Camp 1, and we were there until we were sent to Tule Lake. That was it. I don't remember packing anything because we were basically moving to get out of San Francisco and go to live with my mother's aunt and uncle. And we all lived in one little house. And then we went to camp. Must have been maybe a month or two, I don't know.
I remember my brother had, I guess they bought my brother a bike. And so I wanted to ride on the bike. And I didn't know how. And so I know my dad used to, in the evening time, he would, get me on the bike, and then he would, take me all over the camps, just riding me. And that was fun. I mean, I just remember that.
For me, camp was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun because we had friends to play with all the time, and all we did was play. And when we were in Santa Anita, it was summer vacation time. So my brother would play baseball all day long because the horse stall smelled so bad he didn't want to come home until nighttime. And I think we just hung out at going from different mess halls to just try different food. And we met a lot of new friends, and it was fun because we never had to worry about getting home on time for anything. We just whenever we wanted to eat, we would just go to a mess hall. And I remember that part. I remember in Rower that Takayo, she had a book on how to twirl a baton, and she taught all of us, a lot of us girls, how to twirl a baton, and she had a class. That was 7th grade. So we had a baton twirling class, and then we became majorettes in camp. And the young people, like my brother, was in social clubs, and this is him in a zoot suit. Yeah. And they had dances with girls' clubs, And this is one of the invitations to the dances. And I think what else we used to do was cut out movie star pictures and we pasted on our wall. So we would have pictures of Lana Turner, Tyrone Power, and people like that on our walls. And we would just wait for the hit parade to come on so that we could hear what's the latest, most popular songs outside of camp, like Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, and we used to follow them week by week. And that was exciting to us.
I think the best time I had in camp was attending Japanese school. I really enjoyed it. I thought the teachers, who were all from Japan, were really great, had great education. We were way ahead of others in math when we came out of camp. I thought the Japanese schools were just terrific. And we went to Japanese school half a day in the morning, and then we would go to the regular school in the afternoon. I don't remember much about the regular school, but I just really remember the Japanese schools. That I took away from Tuli Lake. That was the best part of it.
Well, my dad, we were living in Huntington Beach, and my dad was working for my granduncle, who was the chili king in Orange County, Huntington Beach, and he was working with him. And then, so when they started rounding up all the men folks, you know, the FBI came and rounded him up. It was mainly because my brother had just started Japanese school, and they asked my dad to be on the board of the Japanese school. And my dad said, well, no, you know, he declined it because he said he was too busy working on, you know, the farm and the ranch. And so he wasn't able to, you know, carry out the duties of work being on the board. But so they said, well, that's okay. You don't have to come to the meetings. Just lend us your name and we'll just put it on as a member of the board. And so that's why my dad got picked up. And then so after he got picked up, then that's when, you know, my mom, my brother, and I, you know, we moved with friends to Yuba City. And then that's where we went from camp. And then what happened was after that, when we were in the assembly center, I guess my dad, that's where my dad came back, you know, came to after being picked up because, well, he was at uh, Tahunga or Tuna Canyon camp. And I went to see him one time while we were there, while he was there. And then I remember seeing, you know, the chain link fence in front of us. And, you know, we were, you know, just kind of shot across to talk to my dad through the fence. But then I guess my dad joined us at Assembly Center. And then because then I was looking at photographs that I had of the being in the assembly center, and then between our barracks, I guess they had built an archway, and it was called Morning Glory. And then so they took a picture with everybody that was in the two barracks, I guess. And so I have that photo.
I think my dad and my mom suffered the most because they were just coming out of depression and having a hard time, and they were just getting back on their feet when the war came. So when we had to go to camp, I think it's like my father felt like they took everything away from him, but he was a teacher of Gidayu, which is a, sort of a shamisen kabuki um, songs, and he was teaching that. And I think he felt that they can take everything away from me, but they can't take away my dignity. And I think that kind of feeling was passed on to all of us. And I think that more than some people say shikata ga nai or gaman, I think my father and mother, or mostly my father, would teach us out of his attitude of makenaide, which means stay strong and don't feel defeated. And I think that that kind of attitude helped us keep our sense of self in camp. And I want to show you a picture that's in, can you see that? But somebody in camp in our block cut logs and made teeter-totters for us. So when I saw her recently, she gave me this picture of Angela and myself on the teeter-totter in our block in camp. So it's very precious to me, and I keep it with me all the time. We were good friends in camp, and we played volleyball practically every day, before dinner and after dinner. And we also, the men would build us stilts so that we could play on stilts because the grounds were so muddy in Rower. And so things like that, that I think the adults in camp tried to make our childhood as normal as possible. We were able to have Japanese programs in camp to, they wanted, at first they said, no, we can't. And then later on they said, to keep the morale up of the Issei's, they let us do Japanese shows. So this is a picture of me playing shamisen. We had a program, and this is a group of girls that danced in camp. And this is also a dance that they all did, and I was singing in the background. But all of the decorations and all of the decorations, all of the background scenes were all done by the parents. They all made the flowers hanging from the stage, and the background, the backdrops were all made by the parents.
Well, I think my father, being the eldest, that's what I thought, that he was going to go back to Japan because he was the eldest son. But it, after his father died during the war, so I figured that he felt he didn't have to go back, so we didn't go. But basically, he was so upset with the government, U.S. government, for putting us in camp. That was his way of resisting by saying no to the questions, which I didn't know until he was, like 90. And because as typical Japanese groups, families, we didn't discuss camps or anything except for how much fun we had and the schools we went to and the people we knew. Basically, that was it. But I think for me, because we were so young, I was 10 when we left camp. So we didn't have dances and we didn't have clubs or anything like that. We had 4 friends who were in the same block, and until probably last year, we used to meet when there's one of the girls lived in Fresno, but she still does. And then the 3 of us live in the LA area. So we started getting together, and we did until last year. So that was nice. When we take a picture in the same way we did in camp in front of the barrack. But I think my parents really suffered because they were in their early 30s, just starting out, no money. And when they came back, they didn't have anything. So we didn't have any place to go to. So we were at Hunter's Point in San Francisco. We were there for a little while. It's government run. And then we found a place to live in San Francisco. And eventually they were able to borrow money and buy a house. So, but they never grumbled about anything, which I give them a lot of credit for.
Yes, all the time we were in camp, and now they talk about that injustice and all that, but then while we were growing up in camp, it seems like my folks never said anything anti about the United States. I mean, they never said how bad it was, and how could they do this to us and whatever. They were always, they never said nothing negative about the United States. And so I think that, whatever they felt, they never related to my brother and I. I mean, it was just, we just went on our lives the best way we could. And so, I don't know, I think that to me is, very strong of my folks to be able to do that.
And I remember when they were talking about it, and they were saying, when they were doing redress, they said, why didn't the young people of our era protest? A lot of them were in 442. A lot of them had been taken away to Department of Justice camps. So the people who were left were either young or women, and they didn't have the wherewithal to protest those things. And I think there was a lot of resistance in Tule Lake. There was a lot of problems. I remember they had a lot of, some riots. People were put in jail inside the camp, and then they were sent out to another jail. And but I was so young that I didn't really know there was a murder in camp. My father used to work at the co-op. And, there was a lot of turmoil, I'm sure, with the Kibes in Tule Lake, which I didn't know anything about until I came out. So the good things that I brought back from camp was because of the Japanese schools. I remember singing the Japanese anthem. I mean, to me, it was, how to study, how to, you have to excel. You can't fool around in class. And I feel I had really a positive effect from all the schools. And I remember the teachers I thought were the greatest ones I had all my life.
But, last night I couldn't sleep because when the president says he's going to activate the national military to keep order of the protesters, I thought that's what happened to us in 1942. They put the U.S. military against the Japanese. And what would have happened if we would have resisted or protested and didn't say we're not going to get on that bus? Would they have shot us? And all of a sudden I got so scared last night I couldn't sleep because I was just reliving the whole thing again of using national military force against American citizens and how that is happening again today. The threat of saying they're going to use military force, putting the military against the citizens of the American citizens, whether they are black, brown, or white, or Asian, to me is just so scary that that could happen again. The military against the citizens of the
Yay, we are all here.
Yep.
Thank you and welcome everybody to the Tadaima, the virtual pilgrimage hosted by the Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages and the National Park Service, along with a host of partners. I am so pleased and excited today to welcome to this program our volunteers who are just an amazing group of people. And Barbara, Masako, and June are just the tip of the iceberg at our museum. So I'll just give a brief introduction for each of them. June, Aochi-Berk. Okay, but first let me do my intro here. My name is Clement Hanami, and I work at the Japanese American National Museum. And I've been there for over 28 years. So I've known them, all of these people, for so long. June Aochi-Berk, Barbara Mikami Keimi, and Masako Iwawaki Koga-Murakami have together logged almost 100 years of volunteer service at the Japanese American National Museum. It's a long time. These volunteers are so dedicated and really keep the museum running. And yet we don't always know their entire story. Here we talked with them about some of their experiences growing up as children in America's concentration camp. June Berk was 10 years old when she went to camp. She remembers people in LA waving signs as her bus was leaving, thinking they were saying goodbye, only to see the writing on them say, "Good riddance, Japs." She was sent to Santa Anita Assembly Center on her way to Roar, Arkansas. Barbara Mikami Keimi was 6 years old when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. Immediately following this, her father, Harry Mikami, was taken away from the family and incarcerated at Tuna Canyon. Her mother, Fumiko, then had to move them, her and her brother, to Huntington Beach. The family would end up going to Merced, where they would reunite with their father, and then taken to Amachi, Colorado, and then to Tule Lake, California. Masako Iwawaki Koga-Murakami voluntarily evacuated with her family from San Francisco, which at the time was then military area number 1. And they moved to what Masako called a white zone, inland to Fowler, California, which at the time was labeled military area number 2. And DeWitt at the time proclaimed that Japanese who would be required to leave military area 1, but they would be safe in military area number 2. But in a matter of months, that also changed. And their family would, after having moved once, would then be evacuated to, incarcerated at Gila River, Arizona, and then to Tule Lake, California. So I do have some questions, and I know there's already a lot of questions in the chat. So I'll try to keep my questions less so that the people in the public can ask. But my first question really is sort of overarching about the museum, and it's open for any of you. You have all been a big part of the museum for so long. What do you feel is important about our history, the Japanese American history, that we need to keep telling it? And what is it about the museum that keeps you involved in helping out? So who wants to start?
I can. I've been there. I'm probably the first volunteer that still lingered on. And I've been there 30-something years. And I was at the very beginning when they were still thinking about having a museum. So it was really exciting to see all these businessmen, the veterans, they all come to meetings and discussing how we were going to start it at the Nishon Kanji building. We're having tons of fundraisers. I think the volunteers had so many fundraisers. We must have raised about $1 million for the museum. So it keeps me going to know that it's there, and the volunteers and others following them are going to tell the stories of what happened to all of us in camp.
Okay, June.
Hi. For me, I started in 1995 working for Irene Harano, the first executive director of the museum. And I was there until about 2011 or 12 when I retired. And then as soon as I retired from working, I became a volunteer. And so I've been there ever since then till now. And I feel that it's been a home, my second home.
Okay, Barbara.
Well, I started in 1992 when Hal, my husband, was volunteering, and I went to a couple of those orientation meetings, and the people, the staff that was putting the programs on was very encouraging and inviting, and they made you want to help try to keep the Japanese American stories alive, and so I I decided I wanted to volunteer, and then so uh, I was still working at that time, so I used to just volunteer on Thursday nights, but then I would, whenever they had events on Saturdays, I used to go and volunteer for that. And then eventually, when I retired, then I started volunteering um, regularly.
Thank you.
Okay.
June or Barbara or Masako, is anybody in your house watching this program on their device?
I think so.
Because we're getting a little bit of an echo on the. So if you could tell them to turn it down.
Wait, let me go.
No, no.
Oh, Hal, you're
Oh, maybe
interfering.
it's hell.
Move back more or something, or go to another room.
I,
Yeah, Hal's listening to it on his iPhone.
Hal is riveted to hear his wife talk about camp experience. I mean, this is the silver lining of the COVID-19 experience. I mean, we've really had to look at new ways of talking with our volunteers because obviously they are a vulnerable group. So we don't want to put their health in jeopardy by coming to the museum, but we love to stay connected with them. And so this ability to work with our volunteers through Zoom and other StreamYard and other chats has actually allowed us to learn so much more about them. So we're so great. Well, we're not grateful that COVID-19 happened, but that is the silver lining of all of this. And thank you, Hal, for turning that down.
Say what's hell?
So in I think it was 1994, we did our exhibition, America's Concentration Camps. And it was a huge exhibition for our museum. And I just want to ask all of you if you had any memories of that or any sort of experiences after that and how you saw how it changed the museum. So let's start with Masako, number one volunteer.
For me, I think it was the best we've had. I wish it would come back again. What they did was Karen Ishizuka was the curator, and she laid out maps of all the camps. And the public was, if you were in camp, you were given a barrack and you put it on the map. And then you sign a register. I mean, it was exciting because you see all your friends if you were in that camp. The only thing I noticed was I was in Tule Lake, and there weren't that many volunteers. We were helping. The volunteers were helping at each campsite, and there weren't too many because a lot of older people didn't want to say they were in Tule Lake because the questions that everybody had was, "Which camp were you in?" And I never had any reactions when I said Tule Lake, but my sister was told, "Oh, you're a traitor." and she was younger than I was, but I've never had that experience. So I did meet a lot of people who did come for the Tule Lake ones, and I thought it was a very good experience, and I really enjoyed it. And we went to Ellis Island, we went to San Francisco with short and smaller exhibits, but we had great experience of meeting different people, and I thought it was a really, really great experience for the Japanese and for non-Japanese who had no idea we were in camp.
Barbara?
Well, I think at that exhibit was when they, when people used to ask me what camp were you in, and I would say Amachi and Tule Lake, and then the first time I had gotten a reaction that I did was the person said, "Oh, you're a no-no," and I said, "What do you mean I'm a no-no?" Because I was a little kid in camp, and I mean I've heard of the no-nos, but then I never relayed it to myself, and that's the first time I got the idea that, oh, because you were in Tule Lake, you were considered a no-no, and that's not really so. I mean, we were there only because my parents had decided to go to Japan after the incarceration. And so, I mean, I found it interesting and or eye-opening to meet all the other peoples that were in different camps. So I think it was a good exhibit.
June?
I remember when I was working for Irene, the barrack was across the street in the parking lot, and this was before the pavilion was built. And then I remember going to New York with Irene and the board of trustees and seeing the exhibit at Ellis Island, and that was so exciting to see it there. And I remember each camp had a big banner hanging from the wall, and then underneath the banner would be a scrapbook or a book, and everybody could write in there. If you were from Rower like I was, I would write a note, and then anybody that was in Rower would write a note in that book. And they had a book for each camp: Amachi, Heart Mountain, Tule Lake, and I thought, and I hope they bring that back to the museum, because I thought that was the greatest exhibit that Karen Ishizuka put together. And remember the talks that they had with the American Jewish Committee about the
Right.
word, the American concentration camps and how that was handled. And they agreed that the concentration camps in Europe, Germany, were actually death camps. And while we were in concentration camps here, it was not known to be a death camp. And that was a big difference between the American concentration camps and the concentration camps that were being, people in Europe were being held by the Nazis. So I love that exhibit, and again, like Masako says, I hope we have it again. And I love the banners with each Poston had their banner up, and Amachi had their own banner up in Heart Mountain, and it was exciting to see all the people writing little notes inside the books. It's like, I think if your family was from Rower, then you can go back in that book and see what your parents have written about you. For the younger people, I think that would be really kind of fun to see.
Yes. Thank you. That exhibition was genius. It was brilliant. Karen Ishizuka was an amazing curator. And I think it was surrounded by amazing volunteers and staff as well, because you wouldn't have any of those stories without the volunteers. And all of the volunteers that worked for the museum at the time would have badges that said, "Ask me about America's concentration camps." And they'd have pictures of them when they were in camp. So it was a really engaging way of talking with people. I just want to sort of, I also want to thank you guys for sharing some of your experiences about Tule Lake when you talked about how, there was sort of a discovery, like, why are you saying there's a negative connotation about camp? So there's a question here from Sojin Kim, many of you know, from Washington, D.C. She wanted to know if ever at what point did you start talking with your parents about what happened, if ever, what they felt about the removal and incarceration experience. Do you guys have any recollections of that?
For me, not much. We didn't discuss other than the social aspects of it. The reasons why they said no, I have no idea until my father said he was so upset that the U.S. government would put us into camps because they were both citizens. And I think what effect it had being in Tule Lake, there was so much pressure, peer pressure, that so many people renounced their citizenships. And I think Wayne Collins is the one who helped thousands of people regain their citizenship. And it took years and years. And it was quite an experience. But we never really talked that much about what was happening, nothing political at all. So,
Barbara?
Well, hi, Sojan. Um, well, um, I guess, well, the reason why my folks decided to go to Tule Lake was because they had decided to go to Japan because my mother's family was in Japan because my mom was educated in Japan, but she was born in the United States. And so she wrote a letter to her father saying, can I bring the family to Japan? Because there was so much uncertainty in the United States. And so that's why we went to Tule Lake. But then when the war stopped, then they decided, no, we're not going to go. We're going to stay in the United States. And that's what we did.
Thank you, Barbara. June, did you have any experiences with your parents about camp?
I think because they allowed later on they allowed Japanese culture to be shown in camp. They stopped the Japanese language school, which I was really happy about. But they, um, first they didn't allow Japanese culture to be shown. Then later on, for the morale of the East States, they said okay. So different dancing groups, Japanese dancing, kabuki shows, and talent shows were provided. We would go from mess hall to mess hall on the weekends to dance, and some places like Aurora built an actual stage auditorium for performances. So in that way, my father was able to still teach his gidayu, and my mother they kept busy doing making kimonos for me out of material bought from Sears Roebuck catalog. But it was after when they closed the camp, when all of a sudden they were faced with, well, where do we do? Where do we go now? We can't go back to California. It was still. So in that way, my father was able to still.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here from the chat from another brilliant young person. His name is Cole Kawana. We saw some great pictures from everybody inside there. I mean, the pictures of the Japanese school, beautiful picture. And then June, you had some great pictures of your inside the barracks with your friends. And then I know I've seen Barbara's pictures that's a family picture they have at Aochi, but she has a whole bunch of other school pictures and everything. So his question is, who had a camera? Who was taking these pictures, these great pictures? Do you remember any of that? Anybody?
I don't. 'Cause
I think a lot of people had cameras sent in to them after a period of time, because, and maybe they can even order it from Montgomery Wards or Sears or something like that. But everybody seemed to have cameras.
Yeah, I don't remember how pictures were taken of me when I was 13 years old. And I don't know who had the camera. I have no recollection of the camp sceneries who took those pictures. So somebody must have had cameras other than Toyo Miyatake.
Cameras sent in to them.
Okay, I think somebody does have YouTube open up on their screen.
Can I leave the room for a minute? I'm going to get it off.
Well, maybe it could be Masako's husband might be watching YouTube really loud in another room.
Sure.
We know that today's Sunday, and we want to thank everybody for coming to our chat today. And right now, there's actually 148 people.
Wow, good.
So because it's Sunday, a gentleman, Sean B, is asking, do any of you have recollections of church services in camp?
Yes.
Okay, June?
I was going to a Buddhist service in one of the barracks, and he said it was Buddha's Basu Day today. And I went home and I asked my mother, did Buddha take a bath today? Basu Day. No, it's birthday. I go, oh. I can't do this anymore. I got to go to a Christian church where they speak English and I could understand the pastor. So I switched and started going to a Christian church in camp.
And that is amazing. Yes, Barbara?
I think I was going to a Buddhist church, but and it wasn't like at the mess hall or something. I mean, it wasn't real. I guess I went because my folks said I should go to the church, so I went to a Buddhist church in camp at Tule Lake. I know.
Did they used to burn incense and stuff?
Probably.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And probably did the chanting.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I remember in Santa Anita, in the grandstand, they'd have one section for Buddhist service, for Protestant services, and another section for Catholic services, and they were all going on at the same time, and the whole grandstand was packed with people with different services going on. But that was Santa Anita.
And so religion in camp is an amazing thing. And if you are all interested, Duncan Williams will be doing more programming about religion in camp. So be sure to check the virtual pilgrimage schedule and look for Duncan Williams. He's a Buddhist priest. He'll be speaking more on that as well. There's another question in the chat that is something that I was going to ask similarly. It's from I Umemoto. Have any of you been back to camps you were in, and what was the experience of being there again? And I know I've seen you guys at pilgrimages, so I know you've been there. But yeah, if you can share what that meant, did it change you? Did it add to you? Did it spark memories? What? Tell us some of those stories of going on those pilgrimages. Who wants to start?
I've been to quite a few of them, Minidoka, Manzanar, I mean, practically all of them. And of course, going back to Tule Lake was the most emotional for me. And because I was so young, I didn't realize there was a jail inside a jail. I didn't realize that the barbed wire is much taller than the other camps. They put up sentries, towers before the no-nos came in. And none of us could go out at all. We could not go mountain climbing. We could not go looking for shells, nothing outside of camp. So when people started talking about, oh, they went to Yellowstone, they went to Cody, they went to the city next, and I said, we never got to get out of here. So it was, I didn't realize at that time because we were so sheltered, but that was my experience.
Well, I think I've been to a lot of the camps because when they had that, when the museum had that tour of the different ones, um, we try to make it a point to go to the different camps that were around there. But then when I went, being so young at that time, I don't think I really have any psychological effects from all the returning back to the camps. And but one of the things when I just recently went to the Tule Lake pilgrimage was when I was in a discussion group, and then this one guy said, "Oh, I learned my multiplication tablet uh, in Japanese school in Japan from this Mukushima Sensei." And then so then I said, "Oh, I learned my multiplication table from him too." And we're still using it in Japanese. And
Yeah,
then it turned out that the son of Mr. Mukushima was in the audience, and he said, "Oh, that was my dad was Mukushima, but uh, he was a minister. He didn't. I didn't know. He taught Japanese school because at that time he was an infant, and so he said, I never knew my dad uh, taught Japanese school, and so I mean, he was just thrown back, right? And I thought that was, something really memorable.
Okay, June.
I've never been back to Rower. Sort of like I had happy memories there, and it was beautiful. The camp was nice. As far as we didn't have the snowstorms of Heart Mountain or the dust storms of Manzanar or the heat of Poston. And I thought Rower was a very beautiful place. But now that I've grown up and I've learned so much more of the injustice and all, I don't know how I feel about going back. It's almost like I don't really want to go back to see where we were held behind barbed wires. But I did go to see Tuna Canyon, and I think that story is more horrific than any of our camp experiences, where the fathers were taken away from the children, like Barbara's father. And I think that um, when I went to see Tuna Canyon, that was really emotional for me to think that the fathers were separated from their children there. And like my friend Angela in camp, um, I didn't know until I just read recently in Yamashita's collection of letters. There's a letter from Angela, my friend, that was written to Mr. Ennis in Washington, D.C., asking him, when are you going to release my father? And all the time we were playing in camp, she never mentioned that her father was in another prison. So I think after I've grown up and I see things in a different light, um, it's almost,
right.
it, it feels very strange.
Yes. So just before I forget, Hal Keimi, Barbara's husband, is a famous videographer of all of the camp. I remember Hal going everywhere with his camera for one. And then Barbara Keimi was actually one of those people, June, because her father was at Tuna Canyon.
Right.
Yeah. So and then Kimiko Moore, who's probably watching, I think she has done a lot of the pilgrimages to Roar and Jerome.
Mhm.
I think following you there when you do decide to go, it might be a good person to videotape. Um, yeah, to see I don't know. That's to be discussed later, I guess.
Yeah, we would sneak out in between the barbed wires and go down to the swamps and play. And the old men would go looking for tree stumps so that they can carve these beautiful carvings that you have at the museum. So it has a lot of beautiful memories of good times.
Okay. June, Grace Yamamura is asking about where did you get the kimonos for the shows?
I think some of our teachers were allowed to go back and get kimonos from the warehouses. I think they were held in Buddhist churches in LA. And some of the kimonos, like my mother, we would order the material from Sears Roebuck. And I remember her hand sewing the kimono at night, and the obi too. She would make out of the materials that she would order from Sears Roebuck or Montgomery Ward's. And I still have the obi. I don't have the kimono, but I remember those dances that we did, like Tabigasa Dochu, which was very, very popular in camp. And we so we didn't bring the kimono. I didn't bring my kimono from LA. It was all made in camp.
Wow,
All of
that's amazing because they look so beautiful.
And the mothers did really, and then even the flowers that are hanging from the stage and the backdrop, they were all made by the parents. It was incredible how the parents got together to do all that.
Okay. There is a question here from Irene Tommy Kaneshiro, and it's for all of you. Where did you guys go after you left camp, and how did your family restart your life?
We went to Hunters Point in San Francisco because we had no place to go. We stayed there for a while, and then we relocated to the city. And then my parents were like 30 years old, so they were very poor. Although I grew up not thinking I was poor, but they were, and but they were able to save money. They were my mother and father were both employed by a Jewish firm, a big clothing firm for women, Coretta of California, he was Jewish, and he was very prone to Japanese, and he hired a lot of Japanese people. And so eventually they were able to borrow some money and bought a house in San Francisco. But, they had to go look for jobs. They had nothing. Young people starting out.
Barbara?
Well, when we were supposed to leave camp from Tule Lake, what we did, my folks did, was my father came out by himself first, and he found a job at a mattress company working the graveyard shift, and then he found an apartment to live in, and so then my brother, my mom, and I came out of camp and just uh, joined him. And then I guess I don't know how long he worked for the mattress company, and then he's started doing gardening, and that's how where he retired from.
And you guys lived in Boyle Heights, right?
Yeah, yes, right across from Roosevelt High School.
She's a rough rider.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
June?
My sister had left camp early, and she got married to Art Maury, who she met in Santa Anita, and they lived in Detroit, Michigan. And I remember my sister and my brother-in-law saying they'll never go back to California because they were kicked out of California. And so they raised their family in Michigan, and it turned out really well for them. And then we didn't have any place to go, so the Hamano family that owned Umea Company sponsored us. So we went to Denver to live with them. And my father worked as a janitor in the store. My mother was the cook. And they also had lamb or chop suey. So I was the dishwasher. And we lived later on, we moved. My friends and I in Denver, everybody lived in the Skid Row hotel rooms. And family of five, like the Nonakas, remember, would be squeezed into one room with a kitchen, a stove, a hot plate, and we would play in the hallways. The hallways were our living rooms. And I remember we hung out just around the hotel, the Skid Row hotels, and that was what we thought was normal coming out of camp. We didn't know anything else. And so that was in Denver, Colorado. So
Um,
they did have a really rough time. I think it was harder on them coming out of camp than being in camp.
yeah, that's a story that we hear often. We know like Estelle Ishigo and other people, like even Masako. Hunters Point is a military installation where temporary people lived, as they were coming back because they just didn't had to get their feet underneath them. And we know that the museum historic building was a flop house for people to, temporary housing station for people to regain their lives.
Yeah, Koresan Temple was
There was
another.
another question from Grace about PX and stores in camp, and it relates to something that we've been experimenting with Emily Anderson, cooking in camp, how you cook food with the stuff that comes from the stores in camp. So Grace's question was, do you guys remember a camp store where you could buy candy, snacks, and other things?
There was a co-op.
Do you have any memories of it, Masako?
No, I don't remember that much about it at all. But I know my mother used to work in the mess hall, and somehow she must have got ordered a hot plate. So she used to cook in our barrack often. And we were in Tule Lake, and it was a really right place for hunters to come. And they would be shooting the birds outside of camp, and they would shoot them, and it would fall into the camp. My father would go pick it up, and my mother would take everything apart, and we'd have duck stew that night, or it was really good. We had nice meals, better than the mess halls.
Well, I don't remember really going to the camp store, but I think that was the only place you could get chewing gum, and so that's where we went. I remember getting chewing gum every now and then, but then I also remember my mother with a bunch of other ladies making kamaboko on the furnace in the room, and I don't know how they did it, but I remember they made kamaboko.
Great.
I remember going when we snuck out of camp and walked to the swamp area, and then later on we went to the town of Rower, Arkansas, and we asked for ice cream there. One little store gas station, and he said, "We don't sell ice cream." And I thought, "You don't sell ice cream? We have ice cream in camp." So we went back to camp and to our co-op to get ice cream. We couldn't get it outside of camp. It was such a poor town.
I've been hearing that story more and more where people complained outside of camp they didn't have electricity, the sharecroppers and stuff, but they had electricity in camp. Another question kind of related to what Barbara had said earlier about riding a bicycle in camp. Sojin had another question about because when people hear that you rode a bike in camp, everyone said, I didn't have any stories about people had bikes in camp. She wants to know if you remember anybody having pets in camp. We know Shig Yabu had his bird Maggie.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But do you remember any pets in camp?
No, I don't remember.
No, I know we didn't take my dog. No, we didn't.
And you lost her dog as well too. So very sad.
Yeah.
Well, we know that Masako had a duck and then they cooked it.
Yeah.
For dinner. Okay. And I just have one follow-up question for Barbara and Masako, and for June too. Technically, both of you have parents that are niseis.
Right.
So that would make both of you technically sanseis.
Right.
So how does that? What do you guys think about the idea of you guys being sanseis in camp? Probably not too many sanseis in camp.
I don't think so. Not at our age, yes. Yeah.
No, well, my dad was a Issei.
Right.
Oh, he was Issei.
But your
My
mother
dad
was a
was-
nisei.
Yeah, was a Kibei Nisei, but
Yeah.
she was educated in Japan from like 3 years old. That's when her parents, went back to Japan, and because he had made his money here, and so when he went to Japan, back to Japan, he built his own, built the house, and I guess that's where she grew up in. Yeah. So I guess I'm. They call me Nisei Han, but I don't know what that means. Because both of my grandparents were here in the United States for a while, and so but so I guess I'm Sansei more.
So
I feel younger more.
I look at it, and June, you're a Nisei, right?
Right. Uh-huh.
Technically.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments to add or any thoughts about your generation?
Well, we're disappearing fast. And I learned from Trisha Toyota gave a lecture once that there are more Japanese from Japan here now than there are Japanese Americans or Niseis. Or anyway,
Really?
I was really surprised about that. We're really disappearing fast.
And I only say that because I think the generational aspect of the whole camp experience is so unique because Japanese immigrated here from 1885 to about 1910. The Gentleman's Act allowed women to come as picture brides, and together they formed families and had children. And so many of you people are those children who, at a time when you were just starting to get your bearings and understand, you only knew America,
Right.
and to just have that ripped away from you to a whole generation. With the statistics, like more than half of the people in camp were Nisei. So it's crazy how many, how it could have affected you guys as a group, because it was not very diverse. It was mostly Issei and Nisei.
Right.
So,
And then the older Niseis left camp early to go to school, or they would get a job. And so all that were left in camp were the old Исseis and the young kids, basically. So when they closed the camps, it was left up to the Issei parents to find a home. And that was when my parents said they didn't know where to go. So the Issei and Nisei experience in camp was a defining moment for them.
thank you. And so we are a little bit over now. So I'm just I have a closing statement for this program. And I have to thank Barbara, Masako, and June. You guys are wonderful people. Anytime someone wants to do a program like this, call these people. Sorry, they're probably going to kill me because
Never.
the technical side of this has been so challenging. But
I bet.
Okay, so I just like to say that words matter. And we know that our community has a lot of extra words with deep meaning. Gaman, mottainai, shikataganai. Today we heard a word, makenaide. That was a word used to talk about one's parents, that one's parents would stress to help uplift and guide the children, to not get down or think poorly of themselves. For me personally, it reminds me of a word that my mother used to use when I was growing up, and that's endrio. That's a term to mean mannerly restraint. It was used often by my mother with a no in front of it. No endrio, as she tried to serve me more food. Don't show restraint or be reserved. Eat more until you are fully satisfied. In public, of course, we would show more restraint, but at home, my mother would do the opposite to show her care, and mostly it was a way of showing affection and love for us. We know many times our parents don't always say, we love you. So for me, that word has that symbolism. At the museum, we have our volunteers, hundreds of them working on different days of the week. All of them have a blend of these extra words in their sensibilities, but Endrio is one that reminds me most of the care and loving that the volunteers give to the staff. with the food that they often overwhelm us with in the break room, to their unending commitment to work until the job is done, to their encouragement and support as we are doing our job. And yet many of the personal stories they carry with them are not always known. They choose not to burden us. Rather, they show self-restraint and modesty continuously. So for me, it is so moving and uplifting when I do finally get to hear many of these stories from our volunteers, to say no NDO, to show no restraint or modesty when sharing stories. The concepts and values of these words become our cyclical way of showing our care and affection for each other. And we have to say from all the staff, we love you, volunteers, for everything you do. So
Thank you.
I want to thank you all for coming to today's program. If you want to see this or share it online, I'm sure Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages will be showing the chat part with the video, and the other, just the Makenaida video will be on the JANM website too. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you want notifications when we're doing more programs, click the bell, and that will send you signals. So with that, we're going to go ahead and sign up, and everybody say goodbye.
Okay.
President,
Thanks for your
I
patience.
want to thank you very much. And
Thank you. Yeah.
we have so many volunteers from Japan now, and they have such horrific stories to tell. I mean, they survived the war in Japan, and their stories are just as crucial as ours. And I really feel I want to thank you for doing this for us.
No problem. It's
And
my pleasure.
being so patient with us.
Yes. For your patience.
Okay, we better stop the show now before it gets too. Thank you for coming.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.